Welcome on in, everybody. It's so good to see everyone. I hope you guys have had a great week since the last time we had a chance to see each other. Hi. Today we're going to be talking about Ozempic. Originally, I was thinking that we were going to go through all of like the new weight loss medicines that they're advertising, especially I'm sure you guys have seen advertisements on Facebook now that it's summertime, you know, summer bod season. And I just wanted to shed some light on some of that aspect. But when I started doing some preliminary research into the topic, I realized that there is a lot. So the one that we're going to focus on today is called Ozempic. Some of you might have heard of it, some of you might not, but it is a medication that was originally approved for type 2 diabetes that is injected into the skin, I believe once a week. If you haven't seen the advertisements, of course, if you have any questions along the way, you can either type them in chat. So for the summer bod days, definitely they always say diet and exercise, diet and exercise, diet and exercise. And that does still hold true. What kind of diet and what kind of exercise really comes down to the individual, which I know is not the answer that anybody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear, oh, this is the diet to do, or this is the exercise to do for losing fat here, 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 and for getting ripped and stuff like that. But unfortunately, it does come down to the individual because it does come down to your specific hormone levels. It comes down to your specific activity level. It comes down to your specific how your metabolism works and how your body breaks down certain what are called macronutrients. So that's like our proteins, our carbs, and fats. Every body is a little different. So that's why it makes it really challenging, but that's also why a lot of companies capitalize on that by saying that their diet is the best or their products are the best. But as we all know, do your research because there's a lot of information out there. Not all of it is accurate. Not all of it applies to you. And not all of it is always true. I'm gonna start us off with the Ozempic commercial, which I'm sure you guys have seen, but in case you haven't seen it, and it's gonna be super cheesy.
People with type 2 diabetes are excited about the potential of once-weekly Ozempic. In a study with Ozempic, a majority of adults lowered their blood sugar and reached an A1C of less than 7 and maintained it.
I'm just gonna pause right there so that you guys have an idea of what A1C is. Basically, A1C is a type of blood test that checks for a level of blood sugar.
Under 7.
And you may lose weight. In the same one-year study, adults lost on average up to 12 pounds.
Oh, up to 12 pounds.
A 2-year study showed that Ozempic does not increase the risk of major cardiovascular events like heart attack.
To clarify, cardiovascular is the scientific term for heart and blood vessel disorders. So like, for example, heart attacks and blood clots.
Stroke, or death.
Oh, no increased risk.
Ozempic should not be the first medicine for treating diabetes or for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or pens. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with a sulfonylurea or insulin may increase the risk for low blood sugar.
Again, some more context here. A sulfonylurea is a type of medication class, pills, that help reduce blood sugar specifically for patients with type 2 diabetes. These are medications like glimepiride and glipizide. Those are sulfonylureas that are the most used. Jardiance is a different medication class. However, you're on the right track, Roli. Jardiance is a pill medication that's used to help with type 2 diabetes.
Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
That's just a general statement, by the way. Daily hydration. That's the case for everybody. That's not just for people with type 2 diabetes. That's the case for everybody. I'm going to give some background here in just a second, the difference between type 1 and type 2, but Ozempic strictly focuses on type 2 without going super deep into it. We'll kind of go into why here in just a moment.
I discovered the potential with Ozempic.
If eligible, you may pay as little as $25 per prescription. Ask your healthcare provider today about once-weekly Ozempic.
So that is our wonderful Ozempic commercial. Believe it or not, that actually used to be aired on TV quite a bit. So we're gonna try to break down this medication a little further. Diabetes is a type of condition where the pancreas, which is an organ in your body that's responsible for producing insulin being a hormone that helps regulate how your body breaks down glucose, which is basically the building block of sugar. Type 1 diabetes is the kind of diabetes that somebody might be born with, where their pancreas is genetically unable to create insulin properly. Type 2 diabetes, however, the cells in the pancreas that are responsible for making insulin at some point functioned properly. And then something along the way happens. Either the cells get exhausted or the cells begin to malfunction at some point along the line, and therefore they don't make insulin either properly or in the appropriate amounts to keep up with the levels of sugar in the blood. So believe it or not, when I was in pharmacy school, I actually got to spend 5 weeks at a diabetes educating clinic. We actually had the opportunity to teach people who had just found out recently that they had diabetes and just kind of trying to figure out how their life is going to look like going forward. Ozempic is strictly for people whose pancreatic cells worked at some point in their lifetime. So strictly only for type 2 diabetes. Way over your head, but we're gonna break it down little by little. Ozempic is a medication called a GLP-1 agonist. Here's our verbal jargon. So what I'm showing you right now, what's called a package insert. Every single prescribing information has kind of a similar structure where the first page usually goes over some highlights. And if there's any particular information that's considered a severe warning, or sometimes will be called a black box warning, it will literally be in a box with a black border. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, this is a publicly available website that actually shows you all of the various randomized control trials that are currently happening. Let's even type in Ozempic and see what comes up here. Like, for example, here there is a study going on for semaglutide injection. So semaglutide is the scientific or generic name for Ozempic. Ozempic is the brand name. Clinical trials that have been completed and published with results, you can actually go to a website called PubMed. This is also publicly available. This is actually compiled by the National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health, and you can actually see all sorts of clinical trials that have been put together and published in the United States. Here with our wonderful package insert for Ozempic, it gives you kind of a breakdown right here, indications and usage, what is the medication being used for. Dosage and administration is basically how is the medication supposed to be used. Dosage forms and strengths, this is basically what kind of strengths the medication comes in. Contraindications is a medical term for reasons why you shouldn't give this medication. And then warnings and precautions. These are things that you should think about before you take this medication. Or when you're talking about this with your doctor. Things you should consider. Adverse reactions is the fancy word of saying side effects. Drug interactions is kind of explanatory. So it's basically, hey, if I am taking this medication and this medication together, what can happen? And then use in specific populations. So basically what that means is sometimes what they'll do is that they will take a closer look when the data is available for geriatric patients. So those are the elderly, patients that are pregnant, patients that are lactating, which is a medical term for breastfeeding. Sometimes they will take a look at patients that are immunocompromised. So people that have an immune system that's not working at 100% for one reason or another, whether it's a result of medication or a condition. And sometimes depending on the situation and depending on what the medication does, sometimes they'll also study pediatric populations, which is a fancy way of saying smaller children or individuals under the age of 18. So this is kind of like the front page. So this is kind of like the highlights. And then of course you have your table of contents. As almost with every sort of piece of literature, it's very long and lengthy. Of course, we're not going to go through this whole thing, but I do want to point out a couple things. One thing that you'll always see in one of these is a clinical studies section. And this section is what gives you the full results of any clinical trial that for its approval to the market. Some of the things that you'll see kind of often is safety, what's called immunogenicity, which is a very, very fancy term for how this medication does XYZ in the blood, in the body. That one is more so for like vaccines and not so much for pills. Lots of things to think about. Ooh, knowledge. And again, there's like so much stuff in here. Like if you have a question about this particular medication in some way, shape, or form, like this is your space for hopefully getting your answer. For those of you that are chemistry buffs and science nerds, this is the molecular structure of Ozempic, in case you're interested. So semaglutide or Ozempic is, like I mentioned earlier, is a GLP-1 agonist. So what on earth does that even mean? What that means is GLP-1 is a special receptor on the cells that live in the pancreas. The pancreas being responsible for making insulin. What this medication does is that it turns on that receptor to make the cell do something, to create insulin. So I think I found here a pretty cool video. One thing that I will point out here is that the whole conversation of Ozempic as it is currently approved is all in the context of type 2 diabetes. And the weight loss, it was not studied as a weight loss medication.
Proven cardiovascular benefits in adults with type 2
And then we've got the
diabetes.
cardiovascular benefit, which we kind of talked about earlier.
These molecular modifications give Ozempic protection against DPP-4 cleavage and a high binding affinity to albumin, with the latter decreasing renal clearance. These effects significantly prolong the half-life of Ozempic, providing coverage for 7 days, allowing for once-weekly treatment. Ozempic binds to GLP-1 receptors in several tissues, exerting multiple effects. In summary, Ozempic offers an unprecedented combination of benefits for people with type 2 diabetes, improving glycemic control, increasing weight loss to a level not previously seen in this population, and giving proven cardiovascular benefits.
And this is their lovely website. Here it even says Ozempic may help you lose some weight, but Ozempic is not a weight loss drug. We do not have a study right now to say that people who have a healthy pancreas can safely use this medication to lose weight. It says here adults with type 2 diabetes can lose up to 14 pounds, but it's specifically for adults with type 2 diabetes. It's not for any other group, at least based on what the manufacturer is saying. We know that this particular medication is strictly for people with type 2 diabetes because their pancreas cells functioned at some point. You really have to do your research. This is just a prime example of not everything on the internet is true, because as we were able to verify with the manufacturer, this particular medication is only for type 2 diabetes. Yes, patients with type 2 diabetes might see some weight loss, but this medication by itself is not a medication for weight loss. So here, Wegovy. This is the brand name, right? Look at what the generic name is. It's semaglutide. Why is it that Ozempic clearly says it is not a weight loss drug, and then here we have a drug by the same generic name, different brand name, it's saying over here that it's for weight loss, and over there it's saying that it's not. Basically, the dosing of Wegovy is completely different than Ozempic. Right here. Before using Wegovy, tell your healthcare provider if you have any other medical conditions, including type 2 diabetes. Thank you, Rolly, for bringing up Wegovy. It's easy to say, oh yeah, diet and exercise is the way to go, but it's not an overnight fix, and sometimes it's very unpleasant. Oftentimes it's unpleasant. Withholding yourself from certain foods that you like is also unpleasant. Forcing yourself to move more often than you'd like is also unpleasant. And of course, you know, there is a healthy balance, because you can't overdo it, but it all really comes down to each individual body. They always say that if you're planning on starting some sort of like weight loss regimen, have a conversation with your doctor. The diet that might work for me might not work for you. There are some general guiding principles for the general population, but that doesn't mean that it's gonna work for me, and it doesn't mean that it's gonna work for you, because there are a lot of other factors that play a role in losing weight. But one of the other things I wanted to highlight for you, so this is the Orange Book. So this this is basically the resource that everybody has available that can see, you know, which facial tissues are similar to the Kleenex brand. So here, if we look up Ozempic for all of those manufacturers and companies and businesses that say that, oh yeah, we can get you generic semaglutide and you will receive, you know, weight loss benefits. But here we can see we do not have a FDA approved generic substitute for Ozempic. Even though it has a generic name, semaglutide, a generic version is not commercially available. All of those advertisements that you've seen that tell you, oh yeah, you can get semaglutide for cheaper, you want to be really, really careful, especially because it's not a pill that you swallow, it's a medication that you inject under the skin. If you're watching this on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube eventually, leave it in the comments. You can message me if it's something private or something anonymous if you'd like to be that way. I'll try to get back to you as best as I can. I'm not an expert, like I'm not a gastroenterologist. I'm not an endocrinologist. I am a pharmacist. So my specialty is the medications itself, not necessarily the disease state, but I can certainly do my best and provide some guidance. Yeah, that's my shtick for today.